Konnichiwa, and welcome to our cultural presentation. Our topic today is sports and religion, and more specifically, Sumo and Shintoism. Sumo is a wrestling sport that began professionally in the 16th century under the rule of Oda Nobunaga, a great warrior who conquered and unified one-third of Japan. Although it began professionally in the 16th century, sumo can be traced back far before that. But before we talk about the history of the sport, what is sumo?
Sumo is a sport played in what's called a dohyo. This is an unroped sand and clay-filled ring with a diameter of about 15 feet. This diameter is marked by buried sand straw bales that only protrude a few inches through the surface. The dohyo originated through the mid-17th century, and it is still used today. Prior to the dohyo, the ring was actually a small group of sumo officials who would stand in specific markers on the ground, and their bodies signified the edge of the ring. In order to win the game, you must force any part of your opponent to touch the ground outside of the straw ring. If the judges are undecided, a rematch is immediately taking place. Today, most tournaments are taking place inside the Kokugikan. The National Sumo Stadium, which can fit up to 11,000 people. Before each match, a referee, Gyoji, cleanses and purifies the area with a thin layer of sand. Each referee carries with them a big wooden war fan, which he will use to signal the beginning of the matches, point out fouls, and as well as announcing the winner. Every referee is also given a rank, and you can visually tell the rank by the color of the long tassel connected to his fan. High-ranked referees will also wear white tabi, or white socks, straw sandals, while lower-ranked referees will go barefoot. A chief referee will have a long purple tassel connected to his fan, and he is the only one who can judge championship matches. The word of the referee is final and goes unchallenged.
Each match's opponents are handpicked by sumo officials with no regard to body size or weight. Every matchup is determined 24 hours in advance, and under no circumstances, except sickness, can a matchup be changed. Each wrestler will only wear a heavy piece of colored silk or cotton called dorima washi. This cloth can be up to 38 feet in length and around 2.5 feet wide. Tucked underneath the loincloth is a belt with pieces of starched silk attached. The most common number of silk strands is 19. This silk represents the sacred ropes that hang down in front of Shinto shrines. This belt is purely spiritual and ritualistic. It serves no purpose during the match and usually falls off of the wrestlers. There are around 70 official techniques that use the loincloth to throw, push, pull, and lift the opponent. The ring entering ceremony was first performed in 1789. The first step was to bring both arms together and clap twice. After each clap, the wrestler would rub his hands together and to signify purity of the hands and arms before the match. The next step the wrestler would take is that he would face cardinal north and clap once more. He then would place his feet wide apart, place his left arm on his ribcage, and extend his right arm towards cardinal east. Once this is done, he will then reverse the position of his hands, and he will raise his right leg as high as he possibly can, and then he will slam his leg down as hard as he can. This stamping is called shiko. wrestler will do this twice more, alternating his legs and hands. Shiko is done by old wrestlers today as an exercise and as a way to frighten any evil spirits away. However, in the past, it was meant as an expression to show your opponent his skull will be grinded into the ground. After the entry ceremony, each wrestler will take a sip of water from a wooden ladle and will then wipe their mouth with white paper called chikaragami. Afterwards, each wrestler will then grab a handful of salt from boxes that have been preset at the corner of the ring, and the wrestlers will then throw it into the center. The throwing of the salt has a cleansing power over evil spirits and is another purification ritual as the ring represents a sacred battleground. After these steps have been taken, both wrestlers will stamp their feet once again, and they will take their respective places behind white lines in the ring. Now they are ready for battle.
Many techniques are used during a match, with a heavy emphasis on judo techniques, which is a martial arts based on throws. The origin of the sumo wrestling technique can be traced back to ancient China and ancient Korea, using illustrations and wall paintings depicting two warriors wrestling in loincloths found in the Tomb of the Wrestlers, which is a small cave with ancient wall art found in modern-day North Korea. Sumo itself is ritualistic, and this can be traced back to early Shintoism, the native religion of Japan. One of the earliest documents of a sumo match can be traced back to a written text dated in the 8th century named the Kojiki. Inside, the Kojiki describes a wrestling match between Takemikazuchi no Kami and Takeminakata no Kami.
Sumo was and still is performed as a religious ritual during festivals, which is known as Shinji Sumo, or God Service Sumo. One area in particular that follows this tradition is the Ishikawa Prefecture, located in western Japan. This is performed to call the guardian spirits of the land, who would then offer their protection over the nurturing crops. Bringing our attention back to the Kokugikan Arena, inside, suspended from the ceiling, is a large wooden Shinto shrine called Yakata. This is modeled based on the Geku, the outer Shinto shrine of the Grand Shrine of Issei. This shrine holds the Shinto values of the sport still in place today, due to the Grand Shrine of Issei playing a massive social and cultural role. Very little is known about the earliest history of the Issei Shrine. One of the few documents that have survived the centuries contain notes of the shrine being used as a place of worship around 500 CE. Due to the age of the shrine, constant reconstruction of the building happens every 20 years, and this has been in effect ever since 690 CE. Historically, visitors have been denied access to the inner compounds of the shrine, allowing only shrine priests and high-ranking court officials. By the mid-17th century, over 5 million people visited the shrine, and its popularity was ever-growing throughout not only the Western world, but also in Japan. The Meiji Emperor at the time wanted to push and promote Shintoism as the common religion, and this began to happen because Buddhism was rapidly spreading throughout the country, and Buddhism began to have more religious followers than Shintoism did. To combat this social change, the emperor at the time required all Japanese citizens to register at their local Shinto shrines, regardless of the followed religion. The emperor also encouraged every citizen to make a pilgrimage to the Issei shrines with a talisman to place in their homes. By 1940, the annual visitors grew to 8 million, and the Issei Shrine became the most important Shinto institution in the history of the country due to the Asia-Pacific War. Following Japan's defeat by the United States in 1945, the Western world blamed Shintoism for the aggression shown by the Japanese military during the war, and measures against Shintoism were put into effect immediately. The Shinto Directive was part of Western reform that forbade Japan from funding all Shinto institutions, which included the Issei shrines, as well as prohibiting the propagation of Shintoism in Japanese schools. Regardless of the directive, though, the shrine continues to be repaired. Shintoism and sumo have always played a huge cultural role together, and sumo as we know it wouldn't exist as a sport had the influence of Shintoism not been so strong.